Hi, I'm David Harmon. I'm with my partner Keith Cook, and in this video, we're going to go over the value of real estate, residential real estate.
So if you're curious how brokers come up with the value on real estate, this video might be interesting to you because you kind of go a little bit behind the scenes. What are we looking at as brokers to help homeowners establish what their residential property may be worth? So anyways, a couple tricks here, so hopefully you might like it.
So yeah, coming up with value on the property, there's a couple of different avenues that we can take. Number one, there's an appraisal. So sometimes if you're doing financing, you'll be required to have an appraisal. So the lender will have somebody come out, an appraiser come out and actually do an appraisal on the property. So whether they're doing that based on comps or what it costs to rebuild, what the land value is. And then as a broker side, we do like market analysis. So we're going to compare the value of the property based on what other properties are active on the market, what properties have sold, and what properties have expired. And so we'll compile those together to come up with the value. So with the active properties, those are the ones that are currently on the market that are comparable to the property that you're interested in. The sold ones are actually going to be probably the best ones because that's actually going to show what the current market is bearing as far as the value on the property. And then the expired, generally the expired are going to say what it's not worth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one way to look at it too is brokers, we're trying to establish the value, not necessarily justify the value. So if it's a cash sale, an appraisal isn't required. And so as brokers, we'll go out there and meet with the homeowner and say, all right, well, we want to sell the property. How much is it going to be worth? So we'll go through, do our research, and we're going to dig into this right here too, is what our research is. As brokers, after we take all the information Dave was talking about, we'll come out and establish a price on where we're looking at, which is similar to, but not the same as an appraisal. So an appraiser is involved in transactions typically when there's financing. So 80% of the sales or so, if there's financing involved, the appraiser is brought in, and it's a requirement by the buyer's lender to justify the price. So the bank isn't going to want to lend $1 million on a property that's only worth $500,000 in case they take it back. So the appraiser, when they go out, they've got a copy of the purchase and sale agreement. They've got the background. They're running their own comps too. And they're going out just to try to make sure that if you're saying you're selling it for $1 million, it's worth $1 million. And I would say nine out of 10 appraisals come in at the value because there's a risk for the appraiser to go up too high above in price and too low in price. So if it's too low in value, say they appraised it for $975, now they're creating themselves a lot more work because all the brokers are calling, the lenders calling them. It's like, well, why is this only at $975? That could throw a hitch in the entire sale. So if they know it's $1 million, odds are they're going to try to make it $1 million if it's worth near there. Let's just say if they appraise it for $1.1 million, sometimes the lenders don't want to see that because that causes a red flag on why the value is too high. So usually if there's a number with a purchase and sale agreement, that's usually the number the appraisers try to hang their hat on. So different on appraisal versus us brokers going out and establishing value. Residentially, the appraisers are going to look at sales comparison approach, cost approach, and replacement costs. So it's there's another one in there too. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they're going to go out and look at what it is. Most of the value is put on the comparison approach. So that's what the appraisers are looking at, which is a little different from what we're talking about here. When someone calls us out, the first thing we look at is where's this property located and what's the location of it? Because ultimately, that's probably one of the largest factors of determining property. Is it in a highly desirable area or a less desirable area? So people will pay more to be in the highly desirable areas. And then we're trying to pull out the characteristics and make sure that we're looking at things similarly. So if you're backed up to a freeway or a busy street, some of the comps we're going to want to use would be backed up to a freeway or a busy street, or we'll add some kind of discount or price adjustment for how it would be similar, because most people aren't going to want to be on an arterial or on a busy street. If it's waterfront, that's a tough one right there, because usually we try to check to other waterfront properties, because even the waterfront property versus the home across the street, there's a drastic difference in pricing just on actual water frontage versus water view. Are there any critical areas? If your home's in a flood zone, that's going to have flood insurance, and there's a chance it could flood, and people aren't necessarily going to be excited about that. So making sure we're priced accordingly for that location. Proximity to city centers and schools, and just what's right in the area. So location geographically is important, and also distance from our comparables. So we'll try to keep our comparables as close as possible to the subject property. If it was a condominium, that makes it the easiest for us because usually we're looking at the same floor plan, same square footage, amenities, dues. It's pretty similar, so it's pretty easy to see if 6 other condos sold in one price, and then we just have to micro or fine tune. Was it a corner unit? Did it have more sun, ground floor access, garages, or things? So it's just like micro tuning. So it's a fun part of our job to go out and try to price things, but location is the first 3 things they say about real estate is location, location, location.
Right. I like that too, because it's like if you're thinking like location wise, if you're a Starbucks or a McDonald's or something like that, you want to be like right off of I-5. Mm-hmm. Like for you, that's the prime location. If you're buying your dream house, guess what? You don't want to be right there off I-5. You want to be, on 5 acres in the back corner. Starbucks doesn't want to be there. You want to be on the lakefront. You want to be in a nice quiet cul-de-sac. So yeah, different variety of real estate, but location is definitely the key factor.
100% agree.
So another key factor in the value of a property is the size of it. So you have the square footage, the number of bedrooms, bathrooms, and like lot size. So obviously a 500 square foot home that has 1 bedroom, 1 bath, that's on a 3,000 square foot lot isn't going to have as much value as, 5,000 square foot, 5 bath, 5 bedroom home on 5 acres.
Absolutely.
With a shop and ponies and unicorns on the.
You need those unicorns. Those come in handy. Those are hard to find. What the appraisers are looking at with size is trying to compare apples to apples. So if you're looking at a 1-story with a basement, that will appraise differently than a 2-story home. So the 1-story ground level and then the basement, that basement area below the threshold is going to appraise at a different dollar amount. So somewhere that's going to be like half the value of the main floor. So if you had a ground floor and a 2-story, you're going to get a higher appraisal value per square foot.
Right.
But it's pretty easy with all of the comps and stuff that we have. So it's online for a lot of people and it's changed, but it's easier for us, I guess, to put it together and just crunch numbers to see what properties are going to be selling for price per square foot. So the size does make a difference. And sometimes if you're too small, because they're still going to have the lot value. Right. So like a price per square foot on a 1,000 square foot house versus the one right next door that might be 2,000 square feet, there's still it's going to be close but different because there's still the value of the land. The lots are worth roughly the same. It's that house structure that they're going to throw in there. So size does matter, and people do look at the square footage.
Yeah, I think there is a threshold too, correct? Like in some neighborhoods, just because the house is bigger. I mean, if you're in a regular residential neighborhood where the lots are maybe 10,000 square feet and it's standard, 3 or 4 bedroom house, 3 bathrooms. If you come in and build a 8,000 square foot house that has 10 bedrooms and mm-hmm. 6 baths and a swimming pool, and you're not necessarily going to see a huge increase in value if you're like the super nicest house in a standard neighborhood.
100% right, because there's functional obsolescence for what someone's going to use on that, and adding 6 more bedrooms isn't really adding. It's more sleeping space, but it's not the expensive area. So right. Bathrooms and kitchens. So you're not going to see a 6 kitchen home, which would cost a lot more to build, but some people just don't want that much or to maintain that much. Right. And when we run comps, we will try to keep them bracketed within 20% square footage, just to make sure that we're not going to compare a 1,000 square foot home that's going to be selling at the highest amount per square foot right. versus an 8,000 square foot home that's going to be at the lowest. So trying to dial it in, and it's unique because each home is unique. and each buyer's unique, each seller, the condition of each one. So trying to put it all together is a good part of the job. I enjoy it, trying to fine tune and see where that pricing is. But size is one of the largest considerations. I'd say right behind location is size. Next, we're going to go on to condition. So the condition of the home is paramount on so many different levels. So you have curb appeal, you're going to have financing, you're going to have what are the upgrades. So things that you're going to have, how is it maintained? Is it owner occupied or is it a rental? So conditions absolutely going to be one of those, top three attributes that we're looking at, because it's, does someone need to come in and remodel it? Do they need to come in and put in new cabinets and new floors, or is it dialed in? Is it ready to go? And as much as people like to come in and do some remodeling, it's just going to show that much nicer, and people are going to be more attractive to the homes that are already all put together.
Yeah, definitely. Just been through the process of selling a home that needed some of those repairs, and it was just, if it needs a new roof, needs paint, needs siding, needs new carpets. It's tough to get market rate when all those things are needed, because the buyer, especially if perhaps it's a first-time home buyer, they don't have that kind of extra cash to go in there and revamp the entire home.
Right, and we go in cold sometimes. So what condition is a house? I mean, from the absolute fixer ready to have a bulldozer come over to sparkly clean, and it's just absolutely fantastic. And so, and there's a lid for every pot. So in some aspects, taking the one that is, super low, it's just marketing to that attributes is like, all right, as a fixer, someone can come in, add the fixtures and colors and paints and trims and make it the way that they want to make it. But usually if they're going to do that, they're going to want some kind of discount because they're going to be putting all the work in there. Sometimes we'll look at that like condition, and that's a question for later. Is it like, do I make repairs or do I try to sell it as is? So that's a concern later. We'll dig into that one later.
Yeah, I think especially going into the age of the property, this is kind of an interesting one, because a lot of people like brand new houses. Some people don't like brand new houses because they don't like that style. Some people love houses built in the 1900s because they love the craftsman or Victorian style house that can come with a lot of upkeep or maintenance too. But I think it's just interesting just how the age of a house and people's choices in the properties can really have a big determining value on value, because some people see value in it a lot higher than somebody else just because of the style of the home and what appeals to them.
And we do have a lot of in Bellingham, a lot of older homes, and so we'll try to compare them. So like from an appraisal standpoint, we won't take a home that was built in 1913 compared to 2013. That's just really not much comparison. Now, if they were neighbors, you might get an idea of lot value and things like that. But we're more like bracket. So if someone's say going to buy a house that was built in the 70s and it's a split level, and that's what we're going to try to do is look at homes that are close, that are 1970s, that are split levels, because some people like split levels where you enter mid-floor and you can either go down to the rec room in the garage or upstairs to the main living. Some people like that because you get that whole separate family room. Some people don't like it, and so trying to compare to apples for apples as much as possible is fun, and we'll go through and try to weed out what the conditions are. So if something was either a fixer and that sold for less, that doesn't mean your property is going to sell for less. It just means what someone valued that at. It's nice to know the one that's the cream puff that's all put together. Like, what is it maxed out at too? So there's comps can be there all in between. It's just giving a range of what people are looking to buy.
Right. Yeah. So moving on to, I think probably one of the biggest aspects of value on a property would be the terms that are available. Mm-hmm. So is it going to be just a cash sale? Can it be financed? Can it go conventional? Can it go VA loan? Can it go FHA? Is there owner financing? Is there a lease option? I mean, just such a broad, the more terms that are available, the bigger market you're going to be able to reach out to as far as buyers.
Absolutely. And this is, I would say, specifically your value on your property that you're looking to get. Because if you take the same property and house A and right next door house B, and A is ready to be financed, so people can open it up. So all, VA, no money down, FHA, all these financing options, you're going to have the 100% audience or 90% audience, versus if the one next door, if it's needs a roof and it's got holes in the windows and the furnace is torn out, it's not going to finance regularly. There's construction loans and cash and other types of things, but you keep on putting more hurdles up, you're going to have less and less interest in the property. So
Right.
the more widely appealing the property is, the greater. I think in some of these ones that are maybe alternative financing, where you might be able to get a lot more for a property if you have some type of alternative or creative financing. So like owner contracts. If take the same house and it's worth 100,000, if it depends on the terms of the owner financing, but it's a lot easier to find people that don't want to go to the bank and just have some money to put down, and then the owner will carry the contract. So usually the owners are going to be in a position to take more for that sale.
Right. Yeah, and so if you're a buyer and you're looking, we can help find those values for people. But if you're a seller, there's certain things that can be done to your property to make it more appealing. Like Keith was saying, it's like maybe it's just because there's certain things that when the appraiser comes out or an inspector comes out, if the lender gets word of the condition of the house, sometimes they're not going to loan on it if there's things that are missing on the house, like
Right.
broken windows, sliding glass doors, paint peeling off, just a plethora of things that can affect it being able to be financed by a bank.
Totally. So usually our process with say it's a homeowner that we haven't met before, usually we'll come and take a look at the property, and we like to get a general idea of comps, but we don't like to pull in and say like, here's what your house is worth before we actually get there. A lot of people try to put us on the spot when they're like, what's it worth? Well, we want to come and do the best job we can for you. So realistically, we want to come take a look at it and see if the home is financeable or not, and what could we do to make it financeable. If it's just simple as it needs a new roof and we think it would be financeable, we can address that. Or if there's flaky paint, and we could address that. So we'll look at what type of financing and what our options are right then. Then we get into kind of pricing and conditions. Sometimes we come out there and it's so far gone, it really doesn't make sense to do much of anything, because we're looking for an investor type of buyer anyway. So there's some points where it doesn't make sense to just do really anything, which is funny because usually most homes could use a little bit of curb appeal or something, but some of the homes are so far gone, and realistically, embrace what you have. If it's that far gone, let it be that way, and let the value almost be implied to the buyer. If they come in and make these repairs, they feel that they're getting sweat equity out of the deal. So creativity is great. I think the next thing we're looking at is external factors, such like what's around the property. So we kind of touched base earlier, if it's next to a 7-Eleven or not, that's not going to be desirable. But is it close to parks or schools or restaurants or hospitals, or what's off your property that you can control? And we're again going back to location, because we're going to be comparing to other homes within that same location. But if you have neighborhood A and neighborhood B, neighborhood A could be selling for more money because it's on the public trail, or the bus is there, or that has views, or it's closer to the school, or the school district is different. Or sometimes you're going to get, are you city or county, or are you school A or school B? So there's some of these things that will come into play, what people are looking at that you can't necessarily control, but know going into it.
Right.
And whether that's important to you or not, if it's important to you as a buyer, either school A or school B, maybe that's important to you or not, but it might be important to your buyer. So that's ultimately, if you sell it whenever down the road, 10 years down the road, you might have missed a buyer because they would rather be in the other school.
Right. Yeah, I think we see a lot of that, especially where we live in Whatcom County, because there's kind of an implied value for certain locations. We have great mountain biking here. So if you're by Galbraith Mountain, some people only want to buy a house that's located that they can get on their bike and hit Galbraith Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
We have the colleges in town, so people want to be able to have quick access to the college, either walking or public transportation that they're going to be able to get on campus within a couple of minutes. They don't want to have to drive across town to do that. Or we have a tremendous amount of walking trails. So some people want to be on the interurban trails in Bellingham and be able to just get on those and hit downtown on their bike or walk or whatever. So yeah, there's definitely value in a lot of that areas. Plus we also have a big brewery area, and some people just want to live in those neighborhoods where they can walk to all the breweries. So it's kind of fun looking at marketing, because like Keith's saying, the surrounding infrastructure is a huge. So if you're a buyer or a seller, making sure that you're getting what you desire from those locations, because it's definitely a big influencer. So looking at the actual inventory, that has to do with whether we're like in a seller's market, a buyer's market, or somewhere in between. So that demand is going to be really high if there's only a limited number of houses in a neighborhood and there's a tremendous amount of buyers that want to be in there.
Yeah, the real estate market is crazy with supply and demand, because it really does affect the whole pulse of what's going on. So, and we've seen it where there's all kinds of properties for sale, and the buyers can be super choosy and go around and make offers on one. If they don't get it, make an offer on another one, and just be super choosy or nitpick on the inspection, because there's more sellers than there are buyers. So it's just it's a process of elimination. People will be harder to negotiate with from a buyer standpoint if you're a buyer right there. So it's going to really benefit the buyer in some markets. Some markets it's going to completely benefit the seller, and they're like, well, we just want cash, we don't want inspections, and here's what we want. And trying to find that mix or the middle ground is actually easier for us, because it's more of a standard market, which is usually the homes may be on the market for a few months versus a few hours or few years. So give it a chance for it to be out there and get the most amount of marketing and find the right person for that property. But if you're a buyer and you got your choice of 100 properties, you're going to be able to pick one that's going to be at a better price. And if you're a seller and you got your choice of 100 buyers, you're going to be able to find one to pay the most. So it's they both have their challenges, which are fun to work with, because there's different strategies working in one market or another market.
Right. Yeah. So I think, as far as value goes, obviously if you're a seller and you're in a seller's market, you're going to value-wise, you're going to get more potentially for your house than if you're in the buyer's market. And as a buyer in a seller's market, you might have to pay a little bit more. So the value is going to be a little bit higher for you to actually at a premium to get what you want.
Right. One kind of cool, and this video we didn't want to make too long, but our next one after this, so make sure to watch our next video, we're just recording after this one, is what to do to maximize what you want as a seller out of a property. We haven't quite titled it yet, but the gist is, are you looking for the most money or the quickest sale? Or what are some of the small things that you can do to fine tune marketing of your home to maximize what you're looking for? And not everyone's looking for money. And so it's people are looking for different things. But so that kind of, I guess, fit in right here. Like, what can we do for, fine tuning what you're looking for as a property owner? So that, I guess, brings us up to seasonal trends. At least around here, we're in the Pacific Northwest. So usually spring is when the activity starts to happen. So we get a lot of people who are looking for, say, traditionally looking to try to move in the summertime, because if they have kids, or just an easier to do a move in the summer. If they have to sell a house or move, it's just easier to do in the spring and summertime. It's drier out. You're not all, driving all your stuff around in a pickup truck getting snow or rain on it. It looks nicer. The trees are in bloom. It's a nicer time. We have more daylight. There's more, people tend to hibernate a little bit more in the winter, or even out of town or on vacation. So it seems to really pick up in the springtime.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are looking at schools, trying to get their kids in school. So that's kind of what drives it sometimes, is if you're going to make that move, you're going to do it in the summertime so that you're in that school district so your kids can get in there, or, there's just usually more inventory. So would you say, when we were talking about value, would you say that a buyer if they're trying to maximize, maybe because the market might not be as abundant with homes, if they were to buy a house off season, do you think that they would save some money?
Potentially. I mean, everyone's unique, but my gut would say yes, because there's not as many buyers that are out there. And properties do sell year round. So it's not like there's
Right.
just like shut down and you're the only person to buy. A lot of sellers don't want to deal with selling during, say, the holiday season. Usually, I would say between Thanksgiving and New Year's, that's kind of where people more have their own little family time. And so if you're a buyer in that market, there's not as many that are out there. So I see some sales that happen that way that are good deals. Sometimes there's tax implications. So people want to close if it's an investment property in one tax year versus the other. And if you're in a position to just cut it off and say close at year's end, there could be a benefit for a seller. So you might get an advantage as a buyer that way.
Right. So I guess it would in a typical normal market, you would what we're kind of saying is that a seller might maximize their profit by selling during that time frame of spring to summer.
It could, and as much as so the springtime, usually what happens, more sellers are going to put their properties on the market and more buyers are going to be out there.
Right.
In the wintertime, there's going to be less properties and less buyers.
Right.
So finding something that works, say, specifically for a buyer, depending on the type of buyer situation you're in, it's nice to not necessarily be in a multiple offer situation. So you're going to have a greater chance of just having a single offer, just your offer meeting with the seller, and you're getting it more on your terms versus if there's 3 other offers. So
Right.
if there's more offers, and that's other videos too, then what can you do to make your offer as attractive as possible? Because now you're trying to have the seller take you out of 1 out of 3 buyers versus you having the seller take you and saying, well, I got 3 other houses. If you don't want to sell me this one, it's just a total difference on how you can negotiate as far as where you feel your strength is.
Yeah. So I guess my takeaway would be that sellers, to maximize their value, would want to do it during the season that their house looks the best. So the grass is green, the sun is out, the yard's mowed, the house is looking great. From a buyer standpoint, I think you got to be ready 12 months of the year, because you just never know. You don't want to, if the house comes on the market, like Keith was saying, during that off time between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and you're not pre-qualified or whatever, and that was the house that you really wanted, and you weren't ready. And so I think on a buyer standpoint, you just got to be ready to go all the time if you're actively looking.
Right. You're spot on, and especially if you're looking for something that's a little bit more unique. So, like I say, the Franklin model, I like to say, is just that if it's the same house that is built every 6th house in a subdivision of a big subdivision, it's easy to compare all just to Franklin's. And if you're fine with having any old house and that's what you're looking for, you can be a little bit more choosy. But if you're looking for the double XL Franklin with triple whatever, and that's a one of a kind, then when that does hit the market, you have to be kind of ready to go. It's kind of interesting right now with property. So we're saying right now everything we think is residential, and they're talking about some rules, and we're not going to get all political, but you could take a residential lot and add more units to it, maybe up to 6. So we don't have the whole final on this, and we know Bellingham is making it a little easier with accessory dwelling units. And what can we do to get more people living in the area? Because more, we're growing as a earth here, so people got to live somewhere. I see in the future where there's going to be more of a possibility of that there would be multifamily or a couple people living on what used to be just one family. Now there might be 2 families.
Right. Yeah, I think looking at value when it comes to zoning is something that a realtor can really help you out with. This is where it's going to, so whether you're a buyer or a seller, because you may not know what you have or what you're ready to buy, and that's our job, is to help research that stuff. So yeah, whether it may be some environmental things that are on the property that are going to affect the value, or some zoning changes. Keith was just talking the other day about a property that they were selling. They didn't realize they could actually pull off another lot on it, and that's huge value to the buyer and the seller to find that out. And if neither party knows that going in, that's kind of a miss on our side.
No, for sure. And that one was interesting because the sellers didn't realize it and the previous broker didn't realize it and called and got all mad at me because we did a little bit of research and figured out, yeah, you could pull an extra lot, and that did happen and a home was built there. The and some of the stuff too, like we're looking, like, say you have a home on an acre. Well, what's the zoning? Is it zoned? And it's saying existing, not like I was just saying where they may upgrade the zoning, but are you zoned just for one house? So we have like the Birchwood neighborhood where it's 20,000 square feet per lot, the majority of them. Or if you took 20,000 square foot lot and put that over by Western, you might be zoned for a 30 unit apartment building. So it's still 1 acre, but what is the zoning? And so in Birchwood, they'll pay for one home. And it really didn't matter if it was a 20,000 square foot lot or a 5 or a 10. People may like it, but that's going to be kind of consistent with the neighborhood. So that's going to be regular value. But when you put, say, a house on an acre that you could do more to, or force value and put 30 units on there, now we're going to come out and look at what's the home worth as it sits on an acre, but what's also the extra implied value of those extra 29 units you could put on there, and how would that fit into the equation? Mm-hmm. And so that's pretty important to really know what your zoning is. What can you do with it? And sometimes if you have a zoning, like it's zoned industrial, well, depending on where it's at, is that an advantage or not? And it depends on what the end user wants to use it for.
Right. And I think we see a lot in the city of Bellingham, and actually in the county as well, are the ADUs. And you'll see a seller maybe marketing it that there's an ADU. So we try to protect our buyer, making sure that we reach out to the city to see actually what the parameters are to actually have an ADU there. Or sometimes there's a house in a garage that may be able to be converted, and the seller isn't aware of it. And so we try to reach out to the buyer and let them know that might be a possible.
And I think the word, we hear it a lot, and we don't like to hear it, is the word illegal. And so in this office, we don't say illegal. We use the word non-conforming, because it's not uncommon to have someone that had a house, that had a basement, then all of a sudden they had a friend or a neighbor who was pretty handy with construction, and now that's a whole other separate unit. Did they or did they not go get permits? And now here we are. Someone was living in there. 5 years later, they call us to go sell it. And now what are we going to do to market that home? And it's not buyer beware, but you have to let people know and disclose what's going on. And sometimes people are more than willing to take that on. We just last week had someone call, there was like, I don't know, if 2 or 3 extra units in there. And so I just looked at a property over the weekend and there was 2 extra units in there. So it kind of depends on how thick your skin is and what you want to do if you're going to get something that is, air quote, non-conforming. Our job is we try to recognize if something is non-conforming, so you'll know as a buyer, if you're going to buy it, what the limitations are when you go to sell it, or what your disclosures would be. And not saying that that's not a value to the seller, because the seller having that, it's just finding a like kind or like-minded person. And a lot of times I think there is a similarity with someone who sold a house and someone who's going to buy a house, because they're both attracted to the location, the style, and a lot of the features of that house. So I wouldn't say that you have to put it all back together, because you could find the same. If you live there for 20 years, ideally you're selling it to you 20 years ago, and they're going to say, great, I love what you've done.
And then also, like, we deal with a lot of environmental things. So you might be able to get a 10-acre parcel. The buyer found his perfect place, but maybe there's wetlands on it and it doesn't have the shop. And I think we've talked about this before. So the environmental for a buyer, just because it has 10 acres and you think I'm going to build my dream shop on it, there could be some environmental issues on that property that are going to affect your ability to actually build that shop.
So yeah, absolutely a little research on that. So we looked at a house, I think it just sold, but they started off like $1.5 million or even $1.6 million. I think it just sold for $1.1 million, and they had to lower the price $500,000. Beautiful home, like over 4,000 square feet, brand new construction. But because of the zoning and limitations on what they had to snug it up to one corner, and you couldn't do anything else with it. And most people are going to want 5 acres, don't want to feel like, they want to be more in the center of it and feel they had room for a pygmy goat or a pony or some ducks or, cows and chickens. But this one, it was limited. You couldn't do anything with it. I don't even think you could put a a greenhouse on it. So it was like maxed out. And most people on acreage, usually I would say people on acreage are a little thicker skin, or they want it for a reason. They want either the privacy or the square footage so they can put all of their stuff, or animals, or what they want. But this one didn't offer any of that. And it was such a huge house with zero limitations. So we're 100 all limitations.
I think we also need to quickly touch on like HOAs and CC&Rs, because I think value implied on a property. If you're a buyer and you're looking to buy a place, but you really need to park your camper in the driveway or alongside the house, if there's certain HOAs or CC&Rs, you need to be aware of that before you buy it, because you could end up buying a house that you can't park your camper or RV there.
Right. So going through here, so the HOA is a homeowner association, and that's usually where you're going to pay some type of monthly dues because there's some kind of common features that you would have. And what the HOA will have is something, the CC&Rs is the conditions, covenants, and restrictions, and those are recorded against the property too, and sometimes they're amended, basically saying the rules by these 100 people that live in this neighborhood are going to follow by these rules, and the HOA, homeowner association, collects the money and oversees them. And depending on how you feel with someone being able to tell you can't paint your house a certain color or your RV like you're talking about, you want to know that going into the situation. Some people like it because the person next door isn't going to paint their house pink, and some people don't like it because you always wanted to paint your house pink. So knowing if you're the type of person that likes rules or not, they have their advantage. So if you're the mechanic, you might not want to be in a HOA because there's going to be rules about how many cars you can have, if they're licensed, or what's going on. You might want a different property. But if you don't like seeing all these unsightly cars or trailers, or if you're wired that way, you don't want to see that stuff, it could be fantastic for you because you know what to expect each and every day.
Right.
There are some, if you're not sure about it, I would just say get involved. These HOAs, they have people who live in the neighborhood and they get on the board. So if you're interested in helping your community, regardless of how you're wired, if you're interested in having more of an input, you just got to show up and vote. I think it's pretty easy to get on a lot of associations because usually it's almost they sign up by default. The people get nominated and they have a hard time saying no. But usually if you're going to run for an office, usually you don't have to campaign or put posters up, because usually there's one person who wants the job and the rest of them go along with it, at least what I've seen.
Right. So yeah, it's kind of hard to say whether it's a value add or value negative on an HOA or CC&R, because I think there's just some people that want to live in a neighborhood that have all those rules. You have to park your car in the garage. You can't have neighbors, friends over, like just weird rules. You can't have people stay at your house for longer than 2 weeks. And then there's people that don't want any rules at all. They want chickens in the yard. They want to work on their car. So I think that it's kind of, I think it's just kind of, if you're a buyer, make sure that if you're buying into a place that has that, so it doesn't restrict you. And if you're a seller, make sure you know what those rules are and they're passed along to whoever the buyer is going to be. So there's not, and luckily in the seller disclosure, it actually brings that up. So
I guess just know about it. We can have a discussion about it to see if HOA is good for you. There's a lot of people that like them and a lot of people that don't. And we're salesmen and we'll sell them both.
All right, moving on to what probably is one of the key factors in value in properties is the interest rates. Maybe not so much if you're a seller, except for the fact that it could, bring your buyer pool down if the interest rates, we've just seen a big flux in the last year or so in our market and across the United States, where the interest rates have gone up quite a bit. So the buyer pool has kind of, I don't know if it's really shrunk, but their capacity to buy what they want has shrunk because their affordability has gone down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're making so much money, you can only afford so much house, and so the interest rates have historically been. I've been in the business 30 years. I'd say they've been great the whole 30 years. They go up and down. It's hard to see them when they creep back up because people get frustrated. But when we were at 10%, went down to 7%, everyone was high-fiving each other. When you're 3 going to 5, people were all frustrated. So it just depends on what's going on. So interest rates going to have a big impact. And it's interesting, when I first started, it was like values were kind of going up year after year. And so seeing the last, say, 30 years, values were going up 1 to 3% a year. And then they just started to go gangbusters. And then they, 07, 08 hit. And then they started to go down. And then they started to come back up. And now we're more of a flat, or it seems like downish a little bit right now. So I do think momentum has something to say with it too. So, if we go back a few years ago when it was an absolute crazy nuts seller's market, and you could put a property on the market, expect multiple offers in a few hours, people were going way above list and ask price for what would happen. And the momentum was crazy. And people were, I think, more willing to buy a house because they could foresee it of being more value in 6 months. So
Right.
someone might not mind paying an extra 2 or 3% for a house because they think in 6 or 12 months it's going to be up 15%. So I'll pay more now and get what I want. Versus right now, some people may have the opposite feeling, that it's like, if you're out there, well, either I'm going to get a great value on it right now, or I'm going to be choosier because I think that there's the deck stacked in my favor as a buyer, to where I'm going to have the advantage of getting the right house at the right price.
I think as far as a buyer goes, when's the best time to buy the house? When you're ready. So I think it doesn't, you can sit here, it's like trying to play the stock market or the cryptocurrency, like trying to time it. If you need to if you want to buy a house, and the house comes up that you want to buy, a couple points on the interest rate may affect how much you can go to, but there's just not a perfect time to do it.
Right.
So getting into the game as a buyer is going to at least get you there. And if the rates are higher, there's generally going to be less competition. So maybe you get some advantages being the buyer. As the seller, maybe when the rates are higher, maybe you need to make sure your house is dialed in a little bit more than if the rates are low and there's tons of buyers. So you just got to make sure that your house is clean and staged and ready to go.
No, and that's clutch. I especially agree with if you're the buyer, the time to buy is when you're ready. When you're ready to buy, it's ready to buy. The advantage of buying now versus waiting a year is that you've paid another year of the mortgage off, and you're going to not have to pay one more year down the road. Also, I think the sense of ownership feels good to be in something that you own. So I think and if the right home comes up, that's the key is getting that home, the home that's going to work for you, instead of waiting. Because if you think the rates are going to go one way or the other, and you're wrong, and now we're back into more competition, and you missed out on the house you want.
Yeah.
And if the rates do adjust later, a lot of people will refinance their home. So say fall in love with the home, not the rate. I think
Right.
that's what we just heard the other day. But so absolutely get the house that you want. And say if the rates are 7 now and you think they're going to be at 4.5 later, then buy it and refinance it. And then you'll have the interest rate you want and the house that you want.
Right. Yeah, and it goes the same way too. If you're sitting on the fence and you're kind of watching things go on, and you look back and you could have bought the house at 6.5% or whatever the rate is, and now it's at 10. Now
Right.
you're kicking yourself that you didn't like. It's just kind of you can't play those games. It's just when you're ready, and
Right.
make sure it works into your budget. Work with your lender, make sure that it does make sense. But timing, there's never going to be the perfect time.
Well, and if you're watching this, you're probably interested in home ownership anyway. So the sooner you have it, the sooner you can start improving it, forcing value. There's a lot of advantages to having it. So I wouldn't say waiting is that's something I would not encourage. If you're ready to go and you can, and you're going to be in town for a while, I would get a home as soon as you can.
Mm-hmm.
So for the most part, this has been like an overview and like factors that we'll use for pricing real estate. Coming up next, or if you're interested in this, watch the one that we're in the process of making right now, which is tips for getting more cash for your house. So going through and kind of fine tuning a bunch of little tricks that it isn't totally crazy involved, but it'll get you more money and hopefully let you see it from a different perspective. So if this had any interest to you, I think the next one will even be that much greater for you. So anyways, as usual, appreciate you watching this with Dave and I, and if we can be of any assistance, let us know. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow, and I think we're going to make it so you can send us some cash too. Isn't there one of those options? We're not there yet, but when we do, make sure to send us some cash too.